Yeah.
Can we broaden this for a second into
more hip-hop?
what used to be the politics of these two parties? And I think one thing that's consistent in Republicanism through tonight, and what we're talking about here, is Republicans do not behave as absolutists. They will go with the nominee who represents most of what they think or is closest to what they think, and they don't complain about that. You can't look back at any Republican presidential campaign and find something comparable to the Democratic nominee being complained about because he's not strong enough on climate or she's not strong enough on, international trade the way we want her to be. This is a constant in Democratic presidential politics. Biden's challenge, big challenge right now, is Gaza, as Joy has pointed out. He has challenges with people who say he's not, doing enough on climate. He has challenges. There are some people who've had all of their student loans forgiven who think he's great and they know he did it. And then there's others who don't have all of their student loans forgiven and they're going, what about my... That doesn't exist on the Republican side of politics. It doesn't matter how you vary off of an absolutist position, as long as you're close enough to it. They're all for tax cuts, they're all for supporting guns, and they're all, they're all anti-abortion. And what Trump has just identified is, it turns out there's some flexibility there too. And so this is a unique challenge on the Democratic side. It's only the Democratic nominee who is challenged within, and it's always the Democratic nominee. It's not just Joe Biden, it's every one of them. Hillary Clinton had real problems because she said the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which actually was the best negotiated trade agreement in American history, she said it was the gold standard of trade agreements, and she had to back off and become opposed to it. Yeah. In order to hold that coalition together. Nothing like that ever happens on the Republican side.
And that's because, Jamelle Bouie was on my show this week making a similar point about basically that there's policy trading happening in the Democratic coalition, right? There's concrete things you want from government, right? There's concrete policies. It's voting no on TPP, or it's student loan forgiveness, or it's an end to the war in Gaza.
Real
and pressure.
world problems
These are
that government action could
exactly.
address. Yes.
And the Republican Party has increasingly operated outside of actual tangible policy trading. And so there was a few funny moments actually where Haley, I saw her in Iowa trying to go at Trump on ethanol and fuel standards.
Right.
And I'm just thinking that 12 years ago maybe works, but they don't care, man.
Yeah.
You think you're going to win on some
They don't have a platform.
They're operating. What is happening here is operating at such a level detached from the horse trading around ethanol.
Trump is saying you're welcome to the farmers that he delivered billions of dollars to in aid from a trade war that he
started.
created.
Exactly.
But the challenge that you're talking about that Joe Biden is going to face, when it comes to policy, he will be able to rise to it. He hasn't even started campaigning yet, and we do have an improving economy. There's a very good chance rates are going to get cut. He passed a massive infrastructure law. He did something on student loans, and he is deeply involved in two wars. So when you talk about that challenge, he will be able to say, on a policy front, I just delivered. And what will no labels say then while they're out there going, he's so far to the left and Trump's so far to the right, we need something in the middle. Joe Biden's got his report card to show.
But, Bernie Sanders actually personifies this challenge in Democratic presidential politics. And he personifies it in a great way, because there's no one to the left of Bernie Sanders historically in the United States Senate and when he was in the House on virtually every subject. And certainly there was no one to his left as a presidential candidate. But in the end, whether that is the endorsement of the Democratic nominee, Bernie Sanders is always there. In the United States Senate, he goes in wanting a Green New Deal. He wants all of this. But in the end, when the vote is, here's the thing. It's the thing we can get Joe Manchin on. This is the best we can do. Bernie Sanders votes for it every single time, which is to say, that is the rational compromise process that the Democratic Party requires in order to progress on anything. And Bernie Sanders is also old enough to know and remember, live through the lesson that we're living with right now on this Gaza issue, which was, it is indescribable how alienated the potential Democratic electorate was from Hubert Humphrey as the Democratic nominee in 1968, presumed to continue Lyndon Johnson's war policy, which was already a policy aimed at trying to find peace. running against Richard Nixon. And there was a massive section of the electorate that Bernie Sanders was probably in, certainly knew everyone who was, that said there's no difference.
Yeah.
There's no difference between Hubert Humphrey and Richard Nixon. And I heard that from, older people. I was in high school. I kept hearing that. I believed that. There was no difference. Turns out there was a massive
huge difference. Yeah.
One of them was a criminal, and one of them was an honorable person who was dragged into a policy he didn't like and was trying to work his way out of. And so Bernie Sanders knows that lesson of, the voters who did not show up for Hubert Humphrey. By the way, Nixon won by less than 1% of the vote. The voters who didn't show up for Hubert Humphrey because of Vietnam gave it to Richard Nixon.
But here's the challenge that the Biden White House has is just that. Is he LBJ in 1968? Because to the point that I think everyone here is making, the Democrats are the polyglot party.
Well, wait just a second. No, LBJ in 1968 was a wild madman who was in the White House personally picking bombing targets in Vietnam. He was stark raving mad.
However, for these young voters, though, Joe Biden is the guy who's in the White House bypassing Congress to continue to send bombs that are being used on Gaza. I'm just telling you the anecdotal evidence from the young people that in my life.
There's nothing going on in the Biden White House that is anything like what was happening to LBJ.
But
that chose him, that caused him not to run.
No, I totally agree. But the issue that the Biden White House has is that the Republican Party is a somewhat monoracial, not completely monoracial, but they're as you said, they're ideologically flexible enough to say all we want is our guy to win. That's all we really care about is that we want power and we will elect anyone. They would substitute a different god for Donald Trump if one came along and he was somewhat similar, and they will, and they'll just move on, right? They used to worship George W. Bush, now they worship him, they worship Ronald Reagan. It doesn't matter. The Democrats have to steer this ship that's got so many different pieces in it.
Governing
the minute one of them isn't happy, right? And they're trying to meet what you're talking about, which I think is the point, autocracy with politics. And the big question we're going to have answered in November is whether politics and cobbling together political coalitions that are disparate and have different yelling voices that all want different things and are demographically diverse, if you can cobble together that politics and please enough of those people who have real demands, the real economic, the real voters who have economic anxiety are young voters who actually can't afford their lives. Can you cobble together that coalition against a party that will vote in lockstep even for the guy who tells them they should die in order to vote in Iowa?
Standing up for democracy by showing what democracy can do in all of its complications. We actually need to go back to Steve.